Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by Foundersuite.com. Today I have Meha Agrawal of Silk & Sonder coming to us from San Francisco. How's your day going?
It's going well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm up in Marin. It's a beautiful day here. Is it nice and sunny there, or are you in the fog today?
No, nice and sunny. I'm super excited to step out.
Well, great to meet you. What is Silk & Sonder? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so Silk & Sonder is a self-care and mental wellness brand for modern women. We launched our inaugural product, which is a guided monthly planner and journal subscription service. So it's curated, it's delivered straight to customers' doorsteps. They get a new one every single month. And our larger vision is to really make daily and proactive self-help and self-care more personalized, accessible, and actionable for communities all over the world.
Okay, interesting. So this is targeted at women, and they're getting describe the kind of form factor of what they're actually receiving every month.
Yeah, so it's a combination of a journal, intentional journal meets a planner with a splash of magazine influence. There's sometimes some recipes and fun little featured content that we put inside. Positive psychology, life coaching exercises, self-help books and frameworks, and we combine that to deliver authentic content every single month that's aligned with a particular theme. So the month of February, we are focused on love and specifically self-love. So inside you'll find guided prompts that are tailored more towards that. In January, we did dreaming, and so that theme allowed for content and guided prompts to be centered around visualization and manifestation and really thinking big and dreaming big. And so every month it's a fun little surprise that customers get in the form of a notebook.
Interesting. And the intent here is for the women to be actively journaling, setting calendar items, goals. I don't know. I mean, what are they doing other than reading it?
Yeah, so they are actively engaging. So some customers like to journal in the morning, some like to do it in the evening. Some, quite frankly, only get to open their Silk & Sonders once a week. It really depends on their own schedule, but the idea behind Silk & Sonder is that it's almost like a life coach in booklet form that they carry around in their purses. When they get a free moment, they will journal, answer the prompts that are inside. Some customers like to copy whatever's on Google Calendar onto physical paper. Other people use the calendar layouts really as a most important checklist. And we even have some customers that get really creative and write poetry in those slots that might be allocated for more traditional calendar work. And so everyone uses it kind of differently. There's no true method that we preach. It's really flexible enough so that it can adapt to what you're looking to get out of it most every month.
And is there an online component too, or is it all in the journal?
Yeah. Currently, it's all in physical product form, and that's by design. So the clinical psychologists tell us that bringing pen to paper helps alleviate anxiety and stress, increase IQ and memory, help heal trauma. And so really what we're doing is providing a tool to help customers reconnect with themselves by disconnecting from their daily gadgets. We do have an online augmentation, which currently sits on Facebook, which is our digital community. And that's where Silk & Sonder members come together and exchange ideas on not only how they're using the product and what they're getting most out of it, but also talking about their general self-care and emotional health journeys.
Interesting. And how and why did you come up with this idea? What's the backstory?
Yeah, I guess it was part serendipitous and part intentional. My background, I'm a software engineer and product manager by trade. I worked at, corporate America, Goldman Sachs, switched to the startup scene pretty early in my career and started working for The Muse and Stitch Fix and a company called Fueled. Really spent the majority of my time in New York in my adult years. And quite frankly, every couple of years I would hit a career rut. But in my mid-20s, I hit a particularly dramatic rut where it wasn't just career. It was my personal life. It was my relationships. It was my family life. Everything felt like it was crashing down. And for me at the time, I was working at Stitch Fix. And so the facade was that life was great. I was working at a company, making good money on the verge of its IPO, but inside I was crumbling. And so for me, that was really an opportunity for me to think about how can I address the severe anxiety that I'm waking up with every single morning. But unfortunately, I come from a South Asian American background where we don't really talk about emotional health or mental health at home. And so I really didn't even see coaching and therapy as options for me. And they're already intimidating as they are. So I tried to read books on self-help. I would be inspired, but that inspiration was short-lived. I would try to meditate. Unfortunately, I found meditation to be very boring. It didn't really work for me. Probably had the opposite effect of not calming my thoughts or clearing my thoughts. I think it wasn't until my friends stopped picking up my calls because I was this negative source of energy for them that I had no choice but to grudgingly bring pen to paper. And so I created this guide for myself after looking into positive psychology, reading up articles on the benefits of journaling. And even though I was reluctant, because I had no choice, I started this 5-minute practice every morning and immediately noticed this magical shift to my emotional health. Mm-hmm. And so the backstory really is, witnessing that and being a skeptic of the analog system and seeing it work for me, and seeing that routine change from 5 minutes to 30-minute practice every morning and feeling my nerves calm. I decided, why not package everything that I'm reading about, curate it, and see if others want this. And so I set out with a little goal for myself. I spent 2 weeks literally creating the prototype. I made the mistake of coding the website myself and integrating with Stripe instead of just using Shopify from the beginning, and wanted to see whether we could get our first non-friend sale the first few days, and we did. And so kept it as a nights and weekends project. I bootstrapped it. And then when that began to take off, that's really when I hit a turning point of wanting to dive in full time.
Interesting. Cool. And can you share any numbers now? Like how many members or subscribers, or what's the business look like?
Yeah. So when I bootstrapped it, we were around 1,000 monthly active subscribers across all 50 states. And so we were doing around $15,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And then we've grown since. We're approaching northwards of 5,000, which is really exciting. So yeah, we are going to continue to grow, hopefully.
That's great. That's awesome. And are you still designing the journals, or do you have people on board doing it?
Yeah, great question. So I don't actually do the design. I'm more left brain than I give myself credit for, but I definitely have a lot of say into what goes inside. So the product direction is still coming from me, but we've also added folks to our scientific board of advisors. And so they are curating content to make that experience a little bit more personalized based on customers' backgrounds and beliefs and lifestyle and emotional health concerns. So once we kind of delve deeper and add the personalization layer to our product and customer experience, that will be driven by experts who are from psychology backgrounds.
And plans for a men's journal, or?
Yeah, great. To me, I think women are more radiant when the people around them are also, living their strong, best lives. And so men's is on the docket, kids is on the docket. We're super eager to kind of make this a family activity and potentially even a colleague and work activity at some point.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about raising money. I guess the first question is, I usually ask how much have you guys raised, but the first question I'm going to ask you is like, why would you raise money for this instead of just bootstrapping it and growing it? Sounds like things are growing nicely.
Yeah. I think if I just wanted to be a stationery business or just have a notebook business, there was no need to raise money. But for me, I'm really focused on building the go-to destination for self-care and mental wellness. And much like other companies have done, like ClassPass has done for fitness, or Peloton has done for fitness, or what Noom is doing for weight loss. I think we really need capital and strategic capital specifically to help us achieve those very ambitious goals. And so in order to create a brand that has multiple touch points for our customers, physical product, digital product, experiential, social, personal, and continue to grow into an omni-channel brand, that requires money. And so we have bigger dreams for the business, which is why I decided to not just rely on the profit margins of our current product.
Yeah. Okay. So how much have you guys raised, and from what sources?
Yeah, so we've raised $650,000. It's a mix. So mostly from angels. We have some really awesome former executives from Stitch Fix and Flickster and Pinterest that invested, alongside some micro-VCs. And then most excitingly, we have 500 startups. I'm in their current batch right now. And so lots of awesome folks around the table.
That's awesome. So was that a note, or is this an ongoing safe, or what's the format of
Yeah, it was a safe.
Okay. And talk about putting together this round. Like, it's a cool business. It's definitely sort of atypical from a lot of startups, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's physical journal product versus like an online version, stuff like that. So how did you kind of start to put together target investors for something like this?
Yeah, so I think it was a mix. I think it was looking at investors who really believe in the power of consumer, and specifically the power of consumer alongside building a community. So I think community is what makes a brand sticky. It's what allows you to launch new product verticals. You can really increase average order value that way. And so I looked for folks who were intrigued by the concept of communities and micro communities. And I did that by looking at who else has invested in similar, I guess, companies that target similar markets. So The Wing is a community, obviously, and a physical space. I also started to look at folks who had written about or kind of experienced emotional health journeys. And so really targeting individuals. When I thought about angel investors, it wasn't just who's on angel list. It's who can I cold call and write a compelling note to where they're going to perk up because they can relate. And so I actually did that, and that worked pretty well. And so that's how I got started on that. I think I stayed away from anyone who only focuses on B2B SaaS. I think there is a story that I had to paint around our journal is not our, be all end all. It is our Trojan horse into a much larger vision. And if people couldn't get behind that vision, they weren't the right investors for me.
Did you target, the only one that like immediately pops to mind is Brad Feld, who's written about like depression and stuff like that. Did you target him at all?
I feel like I've been referred to him, but I haven't. I didn't target, but I did target folks like him. But yeah.
Well, save that for your next round, because I think they do. I think he does. I could totally be wrong about this. I think he does some angel investing, but his fund in Boulder does larger deals. So
yeah, that would be great for the seed round.
I haven't actually read any of his articles. I just know he's like come out very publicly, which is unusual for a VC, and talked about challenges with depression, stuff like that. Interesting. And then you did this before going into 500 startups, or is this all coinciding?
So the amount is including 500 startups, but I raised right before, I was in the middle of finishing my round when I got news that 500 startups also wanted to invest.
And so, but you're in the accelerator program, or just okay?
Yeah.
And why did you decide to go through an accelerator? It sounds like
it
was already.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I got a lot of contradictory feedback from current investors, founder friends. I think there's pros and cons to being in an accelerator, but for me, I'm a solo founder. And so for me, what's most important is if I have to give up a little bit of equity for a sounding board for growth mentorship, for a lot of, resources that I wouldn't necessarily get just on my own, or I'd have to work harder for. It was totally worth it. And so I loved everyone I met at 500 Startups. I love their philosophy. I love their focus on growth alongside fundraising and really thinking about building sustainable revenue models, understanding your customers. And so for me, I knew it would be a net value add. And so even though the timing of it seems like it happened too late, for me, I came in very focused on wanting to, put all my effort into growth, and they were, open to that. And so I think it's been a great ride so far.
What's the most interesting or surprising thing you've maybe learned or gained from the program so far? Anything like really like eye-opening to you?
Yeah, I think I surprise myself every day while being in this accelerator of how much low-hanging fruit there is to increase your conversion rate. I mean, it sounds obvious, but my background as a software engineer, I tend to over-engineer things, and there's just simple things like the copy and the offers that you run can have such a large impact in your customers and their willingness to convert. And so I think that was eye-opening. And then the other thing that was eye-opening is just learning to become a better storyteller. I think I tend to give a lot of facts, and sometimes, you have to tug at the heart when you are storytelling. And so I haven't quite perfected this yet, but it's been eye-opening to watch the tactics that go behind it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of 500 Startups. We have relationship with them, and
yeah.
We didn't chat, but I was in there last week doing the batch 26 presentations, and it's fun to see what they've built.
Yeah.
Good program. So there's my stamp. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned kind of on that same vein there, like raising money as a numbers game versus sort of doing it authentic to you. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Yeah, when I started, I felt like I got all this advice, and people gave me the same advice when I was dating, and it's all noise. I think everybody has their own story, and I think my story is that when I have to fake it till I make it and create fake FOMO and do all these things, I think for me it feels unnatural, and that really comes across, and it shows a lack of confidence on my part. And I think it was really hard in the early days for me to force myself to have conversations with funds that I knew were not going to write a check, because I felt like the story that I was telling them was a story they wanted to hear versus what I actually wanted to share. But for the numbers game thing, I think I get that works for a lot of people, but for me, it's really thinking about how can I increase my conversion rate with these investors. So you can have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 investors on your lead list, which is truly a numbers game. But is that time being well spent? Instead, if it was only 100 or 200, names, or even 50 names, but with folks that you can really create that personal connection with, that always leads to a better outcome, whether they introduce you to other people or whether they write you the check. And for me, I began to really look at who really got the story and the vision behind Silk and Sonder. And a lot of my investors are, former founders themselves, and they can relate to the story around waking up with anxiety and not having a way to funnel that and really believe in what we're building and the peer-to-peer accountability side of things that comes through a community. And so I think for me, it's getting crystal clear on who are your ideal types of investors and why do you want them. So, for most of my investors, they all add something unique or valuable. And I'm surprised every day. Every time I send my investor updates, I'm just reminded that I chose the right cohort of investors this round, because they all are willing to help. I'll be very curious how the next round goes for us, but
yeah. How do you leverage them? How do you get them to help? Like, is it just asking for advice or more specific things?
Yeah, so I try not to ask for advice unless I absolutely need it, because I feel like I'm getting advice from so many people all the time. But I actually, I do my monthly investor updates, and I try to ask, some people say to ask just one question, but I think my investors are very multifaceted. And so for me, it's worth asking 2 to 3 questions so that if any of those resonate for them, they can respond back and help with that. So classic examples are around the hiring front. I ask questions on if anyone has press or media contacts. That's kind of how we got connected. And so I think I think founders might think that they need to shelter what's happening in the inside or what they need help with. But in reality, once investors have written the checks for you, they're on your side. You are building a big pie. And so in order to make that pie bigger, you have to kind of ask investors to really bring what they promise to the table. And so that's kind of how I do it. And I also do monthly check-ins with some of my investors who add a lot of value.
How many investors total do you have? Just what's their...
I think around like 10-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many of your investors are like actively involved? And I was just using my example where we have 10 angels, but about 5 are active. Curious what your numbers are.
I feel like all my investors are active if I want them to be. I think I would say probably 80% of them are actively involved, meaning that they check in quite regularly or they respond to the updates and, they are willing to make connections if I ask them. I think a lot of that is really on the founder. It's your investors and your advisors are always going to be underutilized because there's 1 or 2 of you doing all the work. And so I think they're always active, but they're passively active because they're waiting for you to ask them what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you, so what's next? You have demo day in how many weeks? And what are you doing to get ready for that?
I think I'm really, really focused on growth right now. I think we're growing pretty fast. I really want to get our current product up to a certain point where we can then kind of think about what are the next steps for diversification of product offerings and thinking about our digital augmentation. And so for me, I'm really focused on that. So demo day is going to be great. It's going to be towards mid-March. But I think for us, we're not really actively fundraising right now. I think we are really focused on being heads down. And so for me, that means continuing to hire, continuing to grow, continuing to expand our product suite.
Yeah, cool. When do you think how are you thinking about fundraising for this? I mean, it sounds like you've got some pretty nice cash flow, so you probably don't need to raise a ton immediately, but are you thinking this is going to take multiple rounds? What, are you already thinking towards that Series A, or what's your sort of?
Yeah, I think once we start really ramping up, there's just going to be an operations hold up, and so we're going to have to hire pretty aggressively. We're going to have to invest in some of our personalization efforts, so hiring data scientists and some more expensive talent. And so for that, there's definitely going to be multiple rounds. Maybe we'll be a Pegasus, maybe we'll be a unicorn, but I think it really depends on what the customer needs and how quickly we can deliver and what we need to make that happen.
Sure. Good. Cool. Well, and are you starting to actually it sounds like you're just focused on growth. You're not even identifying investors for the next round quite yet. Right? I mean, do you solve the growth and the investors will come?
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say, but who knows? I think there's 2 philosophies on this, right? One philosophy is don't even bother talking to any investor and just focus on building the business. And then the other philosophy is you're always fundraising. And so I don't know. I think I want to really accept the first option and kind of be heads down. But in reality, I think it's almost an interesting time to be talking to investors because there's so much to talk about. And there's also the opportunity to really connect with them on a human to human level rather than I need your money and I need it now. And so I have a few folks in mind. I think 500 Startups also has us talking to a lot of investors. And so, look, to be honest, if the right investment partner comes along and we end up doing our seed round a little bit earlier, I'm not opposed to it. It's just, it would have to be a good deal for us.
Is there anything different or, just being a female founder, is there anything unique to your fundraising experience or different than maybe Was it harder,
Yeah.
easier to raise money? Anything, any
Yeah.
commentary?
Yeah. So I am a solo technical female founder of color. So I feel like, some may say that I hit every single checkbox, but then some will say that, whoa, this is so out of the ordinary. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I have a lot of stories to share on this. I talked to a lot of my founder friends, especially my male founder friends, and they were shocked, quite frankly, on the types of diligence material that I had to provide at my stage. I think I had some investors thought we had great retention. Some investors thought we didn't have good retention. There was just no consensus on anything. And I remember feeling super demoralized during the process. And a lot of my, male founder friends, as well as investors of mine who were former founders that were also male, were kind of shocked at how much material was requested of me. When they go out to pitch, it was very straightforward. This is what we're building. We haven't built it yet. We're putting a team together, pre-revenue, pre-product, pre-customers. I have friends who raise money and then completely pivot their idea, which seems to be the norm. And so I don't know if that's due to gender. I don't know if that's due to the fact that I'm technical and maybe people were expecting a technical product right off the gate. But I will say there are definitely differences. I think all the homework that I had to do will probably make me a better businesswoman. So I have no complaints, but it was quite a demoralizing process. I don't think that's unique to me being female. I think even male founders have a hard time raising money, but I do think that there were certain expectations or the way things are worded to me that are a bit different. And there's a lot of articles that confirm that. And so I really had to work on my mindset and the way that I delivered my pitch because, when I first started to fundraise, whenever someone would push back or ask a question, I would either get defensive or I would get quiet and timid. And so I started to pick up on those cues so that I could then address their points with a lot more confidence. Like, this is how we're doing things. This is the strategic roadmap, and this is why we started with the journal. I think being just a little bit more confident is something we can all work on, but especially for us women.
Sure. On the diligence, like what was an example? Was it just asking for details on your numbers, or was it more like something else? What was?
Yeah. So I needed to do cohort analyses. I needed to do financial models of the future, revenue predictions, revenue models. I had to pull historical data. And the thing is everybody wanted something different. So that's, I think, what made it kind of hard was instead of just focused on building the business and fundraising, I was sitting there trying to get all this data for a company that was a side project before I went out to fundraise. Sure. Like now, if they ask that, obviously we will have all that information. It's fair to ask. I think it was just the level of sophistication required to pull all that and get that ready and kind of the number of meetings we had to discuss it. But I think in the end, it's the price you pay when you have a post-product, post-revenue business. I guess it's the tax that you pay on that. Sure. Whereas I think if you're selling just a vision and an idea, you don't have the data, so no one's going to ask for it.
Right. Yep. Good. Cool. Well, any lesson you would give your younger self if you were doing it all over again, or anything we haven't covered?
Yeah, I think the lesson that I will give myself or would give myself, and I hope to remember this when I go out and raise again, is everybody is entitled and has their own opinion. So whether it's your current investors or your future investors or your friends, people always want to bounce ideas and share their thoughts. And I think at the end of the day, you don't need to think about you need to integrate their feedback, but you don't need to accept all feedback. And that's a really hard pill to swallow, especially when you're out there fundraising for the first time, because you think every piece of constructive feedback that you get needs to be put into action. And in reality, sometimes they've completely missed what you mentioned or what you said. Yeah. And so I think really synthesizing that feedback and not, taking the no at face value and not diving too deep, because you will just end up in a rabbit hole. Totally. is probably the advice that I would give, because I was definitely guilty of that in the early days of fundraising.
there's need to coin a phrase like investor feedback whiplash or
I
something,
know.
right? You're getting so much, sometimes contrary
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
That's when I realized, I think, when I was getting totally, contrary advice from investors, I think that's when I realized that, do I really need to be listening to either or both of these? Because then I'll just end up nowhere. So
Yeah, they cancel each other out.
yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Great. Well, if people want to learn more, it's silkandsonder.com.
That's correct. And you can follow us on Instagram at Silk and Sonder.
Great. And what's the, I didn't ask this, but what's the subscription cost?
So it's $19.95 a month for the monthly plan and $160 a year for the yearly plan.
Great. Cool. Very good. Well, good luck with 500 startups.
Thank you.
Make the most of the program, and we'll catch you after your next round.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.